of the city of San Jose. And most recently, we've added the cities of Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy as a result of the 2020 redistricting process. In other words, the 2020 census had kind of a delayed effect and took place once they had an opportunity to adjust those boundaries. We still have lots of slivers of involvement, as you can see on the map on your screen over in the West Valley. Pieces of, if you will, of other cities over there, but the lion's share of the district is San Jose and South County now. Joining us today are three of my staff members. My legislative director, Tara Srikrishnan, my policy analyst liaison, Mario B. Lopez, and my district representative, Zachary Contini. They'll be assisting me in answering your questions at the end of our presentation. You can submit questions through the question and answer button function at the bottom of your screen anytime during the presentation of the event. It's possible you might not see that right now because of the screen share that we're doing. But if you have questions about that, you might want to just submit your question into the chat. We'll get you, or the staff will get you set up. As part of today's presentation, I want to provide an overview of promises made and promises kept through our state budget investments, reflecting our values, supporting working individuals and families across the state. And I want to also share legislative victories, which further aim to maintain California as an affordable, safe, and more resilient place for residents to live. These budgetary investments and legislative changes respond to and address sweeping policy shifts, some of which you're aware of, enacted by the new federal administration. I want to indicate about the budget before we go into that a little bit more, that we're only 2.5 months approximately from the governor's next budget, what we call his base budget. Every January, the governor issues a base budget. The legislature looks at that, deals with that, holds caucuses, in other words, sessions. The Democratic Party does, the Republican Party does, going through that base budget, that January budget, with a fine-tooth comb. Just about the time we think we understand it or we know where we're going to push back, the May revise comes out. That's the revision of the January budget. It's typically right around May 15th of every year. Those of you who have been keeping close to our office know that for over 20 years, I've been doing a bus trip on education to Sacramento, even back to the days when I was a city council member. We've been doing that trip to bring busloads of folks to Sacramento right around the May revise to argue and respond and debate those issues around education that they want to protect or preserve or advance, especially from a funding standpoint. But I didn't want to lose sight of that period between January and May. And there are opportunities during that period for us to, as legislators, to try to let the governor know what he should be doing with the May revise, maybe what's unacceptable in his January budget. This year was a busy year in a number of ways. For me personally, I want to share an update that I had 14 bills that I authored exclusively that have been signed into law by the governor already through yesterday, as a matter of fact. And the bill signing deadline was yesterday at midnight. So we're done finally with the 2026 session as far as legislation goes. And we had a very productive session. We can talk about those during questions and answers, or you can go to my website or follow us on our newsletter by email, etc., if you want more information on my bills. But think back on the beginning of the year, which I think for some of us seems like a lifetime ago, last January. The Trump administration had not been sworn into office yet. The governor came out with his base budget, and it had a $14 billion surplus. About a week later, Los Angeles was on fire, and we had to meet with urgency that challenge. We had to actually start legislating well uh, earlier than we normally would, with urgency clauses in bills to get dollars and support to the crisis that was going on in Los Angeles. It also informed us almost immediately this is not going to be a typical year. That $14 billion surplus might not be there by the time we get to May. And sure enough, that was the case. But it wasn't just because of the Los Angeles fires. That became kind of an ominous sign that we were going to have to uh, adjust our budget and deal with some unexpected circumstances. As you could see from the slide, the budget that we eventually balanced is 297.9 billion, so 298 billion. 15.7 billion dollars remains in reserves, and $1 billion is a lot of money. $1,000 is a lot of money to most of us. But when you look at the total budget, 298 billion approximately, to have 15.7 billion only in reserves is not an awful lot of money. It is not really enough in reserves. When we adopted this budget, we knew because of federal cuts to things that were going to cost us by that time, because the administration in Washington had already done countless numbers of executive orders and telegraphed Medi-Cal cuts, things that were going to be in HR 1 eventually, the budget bill. We knew when we adopted the final budget, not the May revise, but the final budget, June 30th, which was the deadline, that we'd likely be facing a $20 billion deficit that we'd have to close when we get to the January 2026 budget again, which is 2.5 months away. We don't have any new revenue sources. The federal government has continued in a lot of ways to beat down California in terms of our own revenue versus expenses. We had the luxury in the state, in some sense, I'll use that word. I don't know if it's really a luxury, but we had state augmented Medi-Cal. Thousands, tens of thousands of people who didn't qualify for Medicaid at the federal level were being provided Medi-Cal because of the legislature and the governor here in California. All of a sudden, those programs are very vulnerable. If those programs are vulnerable, then obviously the seniors and the 40% of Californians that are dependent on them, were not just seniors, including kids, all of a sudden don't have healthcare access. So these are some of the consequences. If you think I'm unduly blaming HR 1 for any of this, California is projected over the next decade to lose approximately 28.4 billion in federal Medi-Cal funding over the next decade due to HR 1. I don't know if that's on the next slide, staff, but it's an important number. HR 1 cut $880 billion nationwide out of Medicaid, which funds our Medi-Cal program here. So that trickle down to us is 28 billion. Now think about that for a moment. 880 billion is almost 3 times bigger than our entire budget. Remember, 297 billion is our entire budget. So that's nationwide, granted. But if we had a $20 billion budget balancing act to do, and then all of a sudden, after HR 1, we've got another 28 billion in Medi-Cal funding to figure out over the next decade, you can see the compounding effect, the cascading effect, and the difficulty that this legislature, this governor, and any future governor after the next gubernatorial elections is going to be faced with. So we want you to know this is very real.
Hello, sorry, I entered for the garbage.
Yeah, I can't, excuse me. Yeah, so I'm sorry, somebody who's just coming in here to where we're working. The county of Santa Clara is trying to address the downstream effect of these Medi-Cal cuts for them. How does that affect them? I'm sure some of you are aware, but the county now has 4 hospitals, our county, Santa Clara County. It's the second largest public health and hospital system in the state of California, exceeded only by Los Angeles. There are 15 clinics and 4 hospitals, and their budget is extraordinary. They are going to be short hundreds of millions of dollars due to these same HR1 cuts, because most of the county health and hospital system is built as a business model, caters to the 40% of the folks who are coming in with no other insurance other than Medi-Cal. So as that gets cut, as that goes away, as those reimbursements are unavailable to the health and hospital system, now all of a sudden you see not just your state government in fiscal trouble, but also your counties, and not just Santa Clara County and not just Los Angeles County. There are 17 publicly owned health and hospital systems in California, and they're all facing this nightmare scenario right now. So this is not good. Santa Clara County is trying to do some self-help. As you probably know, I'm not here to tell you to vote. I'll always tell you to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but you might have noticed signs going up saying vote for Measure A. Well, that's Santa Clara County's attempt, to sell you, the voter, on approving some more revenue for them, to try to deal with this crisis. We have done as much as we can so far. The legislature overall has increased its Medi-Cal investment from $174.6 billion to $188 billion, and that's been done over time. The budget currently also expands capacity for over 5,000 new behavioral health and substance use treatment slots. I know many of you are concerned about that. We know that about 38% of our unhoused population, our homeless population, are diagnosed with serious behavioral health issues. That means 62% aren't, which are a whole bunch of other people we can talk about later when there are questions. But we know in the state government that we're going to have to help our local cities and counties with behavioral health dollars for treatment slots, for inpatient beds, and for outpatient services, because of the growing nature of behavioral health issues, particularly mental health issues, but also other issues like addiction. And something else that's happened, and I will wind up here in a few minutes so we can get into questions early, is something you may or may not understand well, but it's now called the Cap and Invest program. Cap and trade is what we have referred to it as in the past. And the cap and trade program is a way for polluting businesses to pay their way out of their pollution problem by going to an auction that the state runs and buying credits, mitigation credits, to essentially as a penalty for the pollution that they want to produce or that they can't seem to stop producing. So we get the money for that, which is significant, very significant. For example, this year the legislature allocated about $4.8 billion. You may be able to see that on your screen, to the right side of your screen. About $4.8 billion to what we call the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So the idea is we're supposed to then take that money, $4.8 billion, and use it for things that are going to reduce or begin to reduce now or in the long term greenhouse gases, addressing climate, and to deal with other environmental issues that polluters cause as well. You may have read that in addition to intercity rail programs, low carbon transit operations programs that come through organizations like our transit operators, like VTA. There's some affordable housing money that is geared toward reducing tailpipe emissions, which is the number one polluter other than industry in the state of California. and $1 billion a year to continue the progress on high-speed rail, which is now over approximately 130 miles and 31 construction sites and over 15,000 people employed. That program will soon be offering, as I understand it, about 80,000 apprenticeship programs to start training young people, especially, but our workforce to learn and adapt to the kind of technology that high-speed rail runs. So it's a big job producer. It's a big economic development producer. We're already starting to get the initial indications of how much housing and commercial development is going to appear on that corridor that you're seeing in the pictures there, ultimately from Los Angeles to San Francisco. We think that is a good project. I will tell you it's the largest economic development project in existence right now in 2 continents, and certainly the largest economic development project in the nation. And California gives about $81 billion a year more to the federal government from your withholding taxes than we get back. So each one of us is paying our federal taxes or filing our tax return. That money is $81 billion in excess of what the federal government sends back to us. We would like to see a better share, and we certainly don't want money from these big economic development projects clawed back to the federal government so they can go spend it in Iowa or New Hampshire or some other place. We want that money to stay in California, employing people here. You'll notice a picture on your screen of CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE firefighters, something really important that happened this year, which I supported, in fact, was very involved with as a co-author, is we essentially eliminated part-time firefighters in California. There were actually 3,000 part-time firefighters in California as we started the year this year. They were seasonal. You know, you might notice if you were in a place where there was a CAL FIRE station where it was a little rural, that it might not look like they were open for business this time of year. Well, they probably weren't, because they were using seasonal workers, because at one time the state of California really had a wildfire problem, you know, during the summer months and only on a seasonal basis. We know now that fighting fire is, and wildfires particularly, is a year-round endeavor. And we need those folks working year-round, all of them, including the 3,000 that were part-time. That's fully funded in the budget, and that shift is already taking place as we speak. I'm very proud of the Senate, particularly, for fighting so hard to make that happen. I am the Senate Transportation Chair. I also serve on the Education Committee, the Housing Committee. I serve on the Agricultural Committee. Some people outside of our area don't realize that there's still 15,000 agricultural workers in Santa Clara County, and that we have a huge expanse that takes our district all the way to Stanislaus in the Alameda County, over the Mount Hamilton Range, the Diablo Range, that the district goes all the way down almost to San Luis Reservoir at the Santa Clara County boundary. So I enjoy that work, being involved in the Ag Committee. I'm involved in several other committees, including the Housing Committee, which I think is the #1 issue we have to deal with today in California. It's an issue that's contributing tremendously to our homelessness, but also, you know, chasing a generation or two out of California as our young people, including members of my family, no longer see this as an affordable place to live or an affordable place to rent or buy a house. And we've got to turn that around very, very soon. As chair of the Transportation Committee, I get to work on a lot of bills, including my own. One of the bills that was just signed into law recently, SB 30, says to public entities that run diesel trains, if you go to the voters, if you go to the public coffers, the taxpayers, and spend money decommissioning those diesel locomotives and replacing them with clean fuel vehicles, clean fuel trains, You can't turn around and recommission those diesel locomotives and start putting them back in use again. That's happened in the past. We don't want it happening anymore. And without getting into all the details of that bill, the governor and the legislature saw that the same way I did, and that bill was signed into law. And then we have SB 695 on your screen. It'll say regarding climate resilience through infrastructure upgrades. Sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, maybe. What that really is saying is that we've learned that when we have problems of a catastrophic nature, and sometimes those come nowadays with just wildfires or massive rainfall that we weren't expecting to have happen all at one time, or floods, that we need to have money set aside, money reserved to deal with those, what we call climate resilience projects. And that's not your normal small scale budget dollars. These are typically things that cost a lot more money. We know right now that San Luis Reservoir is going to be increased in capacity. But when we do that, which is a wonderful thing in terms of water policy here in Northern California, because we'll be able to store more water there, you also have to do the transportation infrastructure and raise up Pacheco Pass, Highway 152, and make sure everything is seismically retrofit. That bill will make sure that that happens. I don't want to go over all my bills in any kind of detail, because we can talk about those individually. You can ask questions about those. I also learned growing up that it's kind of boring listening to people talk about bill numbers and bills, especially their own. I want to make sure we're talking about what you'd like to talk about, as long as it has to do with my job, the California, state of California, the California legislature, and the California budget process. Those are really the two things I have any influence over. I enjoyed very much being a county supervisor, where I had influence over a lot of other things, including direct mental health programs in the hospital system, and land use, and where you could put houses and Jack in the Box restaurants. I don't do that anymore. We do legislation at the state level, and we do budget. That's what senators do. But if you can try to focus your questions into those kind of areas, or what we may need to do to deal with some of the fallout from Washington, or some of the crisis you're seeing, on the streets right now, I'm more than happy to try to address that. Thank you very much. And again, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. And so folks have asked some questions, and we'll remind folks that they can press Q&A at the bottom of the screen to ask their questions. And first, there are some thank yous, Senator. So Ryan is a small business owner, wanted to thank you for high-speed rail. And Dennis from Actera says congratulations on SB 30. And you covered a bit of that. And Seth from the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council wants to salute you for your work on SB 653 and SB 429. And so some folks did email in and ask about your wildfire legislation, if you want to share a bit more about your wildfire efforts.
Yeah, more than a year ago, thank you, Tara. More than a year ago, our Senate President Pro Tem, Mike McGuire, asked a handful of senators, I was one of them, to join into a working group to discuss what needed to be done in terms of wildfire, and also in terms of its relationship with our insurance crisis. And we really did a lot of brainstorming, brought in a lot of experts, listened to people. We just had a lot of extra small meetings to go to, if you want to look at it that way. But one of the things I started to emphasize right away is that the insurance industry, as well-intentioned, as well-run as it may be, has no obligation to share its data or its analytical information, the analytics, the metrics that they use to determine premiums, or to determine which areas are insurable and which areas aren't insurable. That's not public information. It's proprietary information, just like any business gets to keep their books and their data to themselves. None of us in private business are required to share our information with the state of California, other than our incomes. That said, I argued successfully that we needed to set up what some people call a public model, a public uh, catastrophe model that will look ahead, that will model on a forward basis and analyze where the greatest fire risk is. Just like insurance companies and the state at times can analyze what the likelihood is of people getting sick or what the likelihood is of people dying. We have those kind of numbers. The world of medicine is full of those kind of analytics, but we've never done that around wildfire risk. And we've never built that system in the state of California. So Senate Bill 429, which was just signed into law by the governor, creates that model for the first time and brings it to the public. So universities combined with the insurance commissioner's office, combined with the legislature, will soon start producing models, forecasting as to what the likelihood is of your neighborhood being at high risk of fire. And the benefit of that is multifold. First of all, we want to know if we're at high risk of fire. We want to know if we're in danger of catastrophic impact from fire. But we also want to know whether or not the insurance companies are giving us a fair deal, whether or not if we put the state analytics side by side with the private analytics from the insurance companies, whether they line up, whether they're in integrity with each other. Because if they're not, then the commissioner has a bigger job to do in terms of pushing back on insurance companies, perhaps, in terms of premium requests or insurance requests that they're asking for. Now, again, none of that presupposes that there's anything nefarious, any cheating going on or anything like that. All we know is we can't do our jobs of holding the insurance companies accountable on your behalf and holding ourselves accountable as to where you're at risk, without having this kind of a model put together. So it's ready to go, it's funded, and it's signed into law. And I'm very proud to be the author of that bill.
Thank you. A few folks emailed in to ask about steps the legislature is taking to improve and support resources for students with differing abilities, especially due to federal policy change. And there were some other general questions about funding for special education.
Well, we know now that we're going to have to work a lot harder at it than perhaps we were. That system has been largely allocated, if you will, to our county offices of education, our county boards of education. They don't do necessarily the traditional work of the day-to-day school districts that in the K-8 or K through 12 world, but they are very much on top of special education. Now, we see through recent federal actions that they're being stripped of federal support. That's a problem. To put that in perspective, we thought one of the biggest issues that we had a couple of years ago when I ran a bill on transparency around special education, special needs, and differing needs was we just needed to try to up our game. We needed to try to compete better with other states. We needed to try to be more appropriate in terms of when students with differing needs were in and out of mainstream classrooms. We wanted to make sure that we were focused on that. And even that was challenging legislation, to move forward. We did, but it was challenging to move forward as a state senator. And now the stakes are so much higher because the federal government seems to come after, the very underpinnings of the financing of special ed. So we're going to have to figure out how much California can do, to backfill. Obviously, you're talking about real disparity, real pain to the extent that young people with differing needs aren't getting the support they deserve, especially in the education arena.
And also in education, two folks emailed in to ask about your efforts to bring a public law school to San Jose and integrating that with San Jose State University, if you want to give an update there.
Yes, great question. I appreciate the question very much. You know, you're probably quite aware that we don't have a public law school in Santa Clara County. I mean, there really isn't one from Palo Alto to Gilroy, from Gilroy to Milpitas, from Milpitas to Mountain View. It just doesn't exist. We have private universities and elsewhere in the Bay Area. Of course, at Cal, for example, we have a public law school there. Um, Last year, 246,000 students. Um, oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong notes there. Excuse me for doing that. Um, we know statistically that we have thousands of students in Santa Clara County who would have access to public law school education if we could combine Cal State University, like San Jose State, with what we call a state approved, a state accredited law school. We have one of those right in San Jose, one of each. We have Lincoln Law School, located in downtown San Jose. It backs up, the building literally backs up to the San Jose State campus. The president of San Jose State University has been um, enormously helpful in taking a look at whether or not, there is um, an integration of San Jose State and that nonprofit law school to make it an actual public law school. We put a bill together to do just that. And the bill stalled at the very end of the process. We will bring that back again. And let me tell you, I want to be very clear about what the problem is. We got a lot of support with the bill, through policy committees, through legislative committees in both houses. In fact, I'm a senator, and the Assembly Higher Education Committee was probably one of the most helpful committees of all in trying to help us continue to amend and shape that bill so it would be a successful program, this law school at San Jose State. That said, the University of California complained to us that law schools, which are public, are their jurisdiction and their jurisdiction only. So we asked them if they would like the right of first refusal. Would they be willing to step in instead of San Jose State and do this partnership and make a public law school themselves? They have satellite campuses in other areas. Why couldn't they do that in San Jose? They refused. But when they refused and they were asked why, they told us that it's because the master plan on higher education for the state of California says that only UCs can engage in the business of law schools, and they have no interest in doing that in our area. And I told them that's modern day redlining. And let me tell you why. The master plan for higher education was adopted in 1960. 1960. If there are any of you that are anywhere near my age, you know that in 1960, San Jose had about 85 or 90,000 population, not a million. That the county had nowhere near 2 million population. That there weren't students all over the urban area looking for an opportunity for higher education and to attend law school. The 1960 master plan for higher education has never been updated in all those years. 65 years. 65 years. So they're basing their decision on what our needs are in San Jose based on a 65-year-old document at a time when prune production and apricot production were the two biggest industries in our area. To use that as an excuse for not supporting a bill that would allow a CSU campus that's sitting right next to a law school to work together, I think is sinful. And we're going to keep pushing the issue. And frankly, I'm going to keep challenging the UC system to see beyond old school redlining type issues. If you look at the populations of the young people and older people who are going to law school these days, people who are members of communities of concern make up the majority of those populations, and they have the the least presence as members of the bar. They have the smallest presence in the population of attorneys in California. And we're continuing to shut them out and close them out, along with anybody else who's just looking for an opportunity to better themselves, to advance themselves. And so many of them end up doing really important public interest work, especially if they've had some lived experience during their lives before they went to law school, working in social services, working in areas like immigration. That's what we need. And we're just not producing those people. This will give them an opportunity. So we'll keep pushing it. We're hoping to have an even bigger coalition next year. So if any of you are interested in helping us grow our grassroots coalition to put more pressure on the higher education stakeholders to make this happen, let me know. But if you see Cynthia Teniente Matson, the president of San Jose State University, please thank her, because she's not the culprit. She's been for this 100%. And had it been her way and my way, we would be underway already.
Thank you. And you did actually start to touch on our next topic when discussing students experiencing homelessness, because
Yeah.
the next question is, housing costs continue to be one of the biggest challenges in Silicon Valley. What steps are you and the state taking to make housing more affordable?
Well, thank you again for the question, and apologize for jumping ahead there for a moment. I talked about the 246,000 students in California experiencing homelessness. I started to. That's right now. That's not projected. That's not 10 years from now. That's not 10 years ago. At this moment, while we're on this town hall meeting, outside in the state of California, there's a 250,000 students walking around homeless, or riding around maybe in their parents' vans, sleeping, if they're indoors at all, on a friend's couch, or worse. And they show up for school. And we know they show up for school because the federal government does something called the McKinney-Vento Act. The McKinney-Vento Act is a federal law which requires our public schools to literally count how many homeless students they have on their campuses. So that's not a made-up number or a science fiction number. That is a real number based on the amount of benefits, federal benefits, that our schools are handing out. The problem with that whole system is that when you reach 12th grade, 17, 18 years old, and you cross that stage and you get your diploma, you are no longer eligible for federal benefits as a student because you're no longer a K through 12 student. So bittersweet. You've made it, you've couch surfed, you've been riding around in the back of a van, living on the streets, maybe on the streets, maybe in a sleeping bag, and you finally made it, you finally got your diploma, and the rewards you get is any federal benefits you were receiving on campus are now gone because you walked across that stage. We are graduating about 24,000 students a year. About 10% of this number are seniors. So last May, 24,000 kids walked across the stage in the state of California. That's more than 2 times the entire homeless population of Santa Clara County walked across the stage and stepped right into street homelessness by definition. What we'd like to do is SB 33, which you can see at the bottom of your screen, the California Success, Opportunity, and Academic Resilience Guaranteed Income Program. Sometimes there's a little confusion about what guaranteed income is. It's not forever. It's not permanent. It's not a gift. It doesn't come with conditions. It's a stipend. And in this case, all we're asking to do is to give those students a stipend between May, June, July, and August until they're back enrolled in school where they have hopefully benefits again. We'll see under this administration. Community college, CSU, UC, or maybe they've got a scholarship to a private university at that point. They would have made it. They would have survived summer without any support if we could give them $750 or $1,000 a month just for that period. not something they become addicted to or dependent upon, but something that covers and bridges that gap between the end of the school year and the beginning of the new school year. And you know what? We didn't even put in the bill that you have to go to college. You might use that money and land a job. You might go to work for high speed rail. You might use that money and enter an apprenticeship program and come out of that apprenticeship program 3 months later, ready for work as a construction worker, building houses, or some other kind of apprenticeship program. I was an apprentice at that age, and I became a journeyman by the time I was halfway through college. I know what those opportunities are like, and that's what we're trying to provide for people. Remember that budget, $280 billion? This entire program would cost less than 70 million a year, less than 70 million. Now, I understand as well as anyone, we don't have dollars to toss around, but I don't think this is tossing dollars around. I think what this is doing is eliminating 24,000 homeless individuals every year and all the costs associated with not dealing with that problem. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, we determined that for every person you do not deal with by housing them, providing shelter and housing for them, who is homeless, it costs our government, just the county government alone, about $80,000 a year. That's for mental health treatment. That's for visits to the jail. That's for other behavioral health treatment. That's for court appearances. That's for follow-up, that the government has to do, and other programs the government provides to try to help those individuals out. Isn't it much better to give them a leg up, $1,000 a month, so that they can make it to the next level of success, like so many of our supported students who are supported by their families do every year? That's the idea. We have a similar but smaller program to cover higher education expenses at 3 CSU campuses, including San Jose State. And that's a pilot program. That bill is alive. Both these bills are alive and well. We'll take them up and keep pushing them in January. And, obviously the fiscal condition of the state is going to be an issue, but we'll keep working on that. And I know the corporate sector is doing quite well, and sometimes that irks some of us when we have these social problems and programs that we're trying to fund on the street. But California's biggest source of revenue is income tax, and it's not individual personal income tax. It's IPOs, it's capital gains, it's corporate success that's providing that income tax by and large. So as they go, we go. And that's why Santa Clara County and its tech industry is so important in the state of California.
Okay. So Brian, well, you actually got a few thank yous for your work to support unhoused students and guaranteed income. So we left those in the chat. But Brian reached out to ask about and to state that it's important we protect ag workers and wants more laws to protect agricultural workers. And Brian mentioned they're sad to see so many fields without workers in Santa Cruz, Monterey County. So I know you've done a lot to support ag workers and also ag easements and protections from heat injury, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, probably the most disappointing bill I authored was not because of anything the legislature did, but it was one of those days when the governor wasn't seeing eye to eye with me and vetoed my bill. And that bill was to provide protections for farm workers from heat illness. California, for years, has had a law on the books that says that agricultural workers have to be provided breaks, normal breaks, shade as needed, and water. That's it. Nothing else. No special benefits or anything like that. But we know statistically from records that we have, what limited records we have from OSHA and from the Labor Commissioner's Office, and reports that we get, that as many as 40% of the employers in the agricultural industry are not complying with those simple rules, water and shade. And so we wrote a bill that basically said if they don't comply and a worker gets sick, it should be automatically presumed that that was an on-the-job industry, that was an on-the-job injury. That's all. It doesn't guarantee anything. It just puts a little more pressure on the employer to try to avoid a workers' comp claim, for example. That you're not going to be able to just say that that probably happened to that worker, at a soccer game on Sunday, or sitting around at a bus stop. It's presumed when somebody has heat stroke or worse, stroke or heart failure or some other kind of heat-driven illness while they're working, that it happened at work. We could not get that bill signed by the governor. I have no idea exactly why. I never have fully understood why, but another legislator tried to run a very similar bill, authored a bill this year, and it's my understanding that she had some trouble getting that bill through. So it's important to me. In general, I grew up, as I mentioned a little while ago, we were talking about the law school. When this valley was the Valley of Heart's Delight, when it was an agricultural valley, I started working when I was only 8, 9 years old. First picking prunes, and then by the time I was 10 years old, moving with our crop season, cherries, apricots, prunes, pears, as a cycle. I know how hot it gets. I know what it's like when it's 105 degrees, even in a place like San Jose in the first week of August, and you're out there picking prunes, let alone without water or without shade. So it should be easy enough to do that, provided I think good farmers have done that. Good actors, good people who take care of their employees have done that for decades. But the bad actions are inexcusable. And coming back to this general issue of what we need to do, they need housing. I've been a staunch supporter of county programs that are out trying to expedite the production of agricultural housing. In fact, the Speaker of the Assembly and I have both advocated significantly in the legislature for farm worker housing. And now you have to feel like there's a pile on happening because of the administration's current obsession with immigration, illegal immigration, as they would call it, undocumented residents, and going after them. I know you've heard the percentage 40% a lot today, but it's a fact that over 40% of our farm workers throughout the state of California, no matter if you're in a red county or a blue county or a purple county, about 40% are undocumented. As Governor Schwarzenegger said once when I was a young city council member, or county supervisor, I should say, hey, look, when you have hundreds of thousands of workers for me to pick crops, to do the work that we can't hire to Californians currently, then we'll talk about what we need to do, in terms of the border. But on a humanitarian basis, regardless of how you feel about the broken immigration policy, and it is broken, it's been broken under Democrats and Republicans, to go after people who are putting food on our tables and working hard without recourse, without effective legal assistance, I don't think that's right. I think they deserve their day in court. And as we know, there's been many cases recently of actual citizens being caught up in that process.
Thank you. Well, I think we have time for maybe 2 last questions. So I'm going to try to combine people's questions. So you did talk about this before, but a lot of folks are writing in about specifically combating federal action in terms of protecting healthcare, protecting the uninsured, um, protecting Medi-Cal, and stabilizing county hospital funding. So about 4 or 5 people reached out about that if you want to address that again.
Yeah, keep in mind that the scale of budget problems that we're being faced with to try to help out or mitigate some of these problems is in and of itself a problem. The federal government is a multi-trillion-dollar budget, and to it's allowed to spend more than it budgets by trillions of dollars just by printing money. We can't do that. That you heard me talk about the budget process earlier. We have to balance it every year by June 30th. If we don't balance it, we don't get paid. And that's not because we're out of money. That's because the law says don't pay any legislators. You, the people, decided that. Don't pay any legislators unless they can balance the budget. So we balance it every year. But it also makes it very tough, of course, to then go find money, to backfill for the need for legal services because the federal government is clamping down, or for the need for grants. I was told just weeks after this president was inaugurated that he eliminated 4 federal grants to the Tech Museum. The Tech Museum. You know what those grants were being used for? Bus trips to bring students in from all over the county to do their field trips at the Tech Museum, or as they call it, the Tech Interactive now. I'm not sure why anybody would consider that a good thing to do, a good grant to claw back or retract or take back. Um, it's not okay. But then the next question, I think, which is part of this question, Tara, as you stated it, is what can the state do then to help out with that? Well, keep in mind what that example of what happened with the Tech Interactive, the Tech Museum, is happening up and down the state. In fact, it's happening throughout Santa Clara County. That was just one example. The magnitude of backfill that we would have to come up with to replace all those grants, the backfill that we would have to come up with to replace the Medi-Cal, the $24 billion over the next 10 years, $2 or $3 billion a year just for Santa Clara County alone. The backfill exceeds what we could possibly do with a balanced budget in the state of California. So we're looking at all kinds of options. No one ever wants to talk about new taxes or new tax revenue unless you absolutely have to. But I can assure you that all options are being looked at. And I'm part of a group of about 30 legislators from both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, that's going in looking at what can be done or what combination of things can be done to bring back some equilibrium, maybe to get some revenue from places where we haven't been getting revenue, where people have been getting away with it, and using that revenue to backfill some of these programs that the federal government is taking away. That's what we have to do. It's hard work, but we have to get after it, and we're going to need the governor's help to go along with this and sign budget bills and sign legislation that allows us to do some self-help activities and see if we can, get a little bit bigger share of the economic pie in a state that's the 4th largest economy in the nation. We need enough to run the state of California, and how we do that obviously is an important decision, but we're working on it.
Thank you. Well, this is going to be our last question, and I'll turn it to you for any closing remarks. And again, I'm combining a few questions, but folks have mentioned your work on mental health integration, especially in public safety responses. And some people want to know how you can expand these intervention programs and push folks to care and to reduce recidivism.
Any of you that have really solid ideas on how to create a better system of mental health response that's not law enforcement based, please come and see us. I'm very interested in further legislation, advancing legislation at that level. I think one of the weakest links in our society, not just in our government, in our society, is the fact that when somebody has a mental health crisis, there's no standard for where they should go. There's no bed for them. In some cases, there's no outpatient intake for them. In many cases, the insurance companies reject those claims and refuse to reimburse them. It's a huge crisis. It's a crisis because we have a high propensity, a high number of mental health incidents and episodes, especially with our youth. But that crisis is compounded severely by the fact that we then don't have an immediate medical emergency response that's safe. We don't have interventionists that go out like we see in some parts of the country, like Maryland, where they'll take actually multiple humans who are medical professionals and literally create a human ring around a mental health client on the street who's having an episode, who's having psychotic experience, and wrapping them in a human wrap and moving them to where they need to move them, so we don't get into these situations where law enforcement is threatened and where people are using lethal and deadly weapons in homeless encounters or mental health encounters of people who are housed. That's one of the greatest tragedies we've seen in our city and our county over the years is the young person that steps out of a household because their parents got scared of the psychotic episode they were seeing and called 911. And the people who showed up had badges and guns, not healthcare professionals. When that happens, there's a high propensity for someone to get hurt or worse. We know that. And I don't blame law enforcement officers. They get their certification, many of them, but that's not their primary responsibility, nor is it a medically sound way to respond to somebody who's experiencing a breakdown and crisis. So I'm very interested in pursuing the best ideas, the best practices, and trying to get that into legislation.
Thank you. And we're going to turn to you, Senator, for any closing remarks. And some folks asked if there's a recording of this event. There is. It'll be on our website and hopefully sent out to participants as well. So this has been recorded. And turning it to you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for everyone for the questions, for listening to my lengthy responses. I'm spending the better part of my career trying to learn how to give shorter answers and be concise and get on to the next question. That some of these issues are pretty complicated, as you know, or you wouldn't be asking the questions in the first place. I want to thank you. I also want to say for those who may have had a question and didn't get it answered, our email is listed right at the top of the screen right now. Email that question in. I can assure you that you will get a response back in the next 24 to 48 hours. If it's something that has to be researched and we don't have an immediate answer for, you'll still get a quick response. We may tell you that we're going to have to give you a second or a third response after we do some investigative work, some research. But we want all of you to feel like you can come here to our office through the email system, through a phone call. You can encounter me in the community. I was out in the community most of the day today and ask me questions anytime, not just during these town hall meetings. We will follow up. I can assure you that. Keep your best ideas coming. If there's one thing I've learned over these couple of decades plus that I've been in public service, it's that the best ideas for how to deal with the challenges we face come from the community. They absolutely do. We may have to legalize them, work them over, give those ideas to the experts at the state level to refine them a little bit. But the basic ideas about how we deal with these very severe challenges we're facing, they're not going to come from senators and assembly members or even governors. They're going to come from all of you. That's, as somebody said earlier today at an event I was at, that's we the people. And right now we need we the people more than we ever did because some of the institutions that we've been depending on are betraying us right now. So we need all of you. We need you active. We need you in contact with us. We need you engaged, and we need you helping. I'll do my job, but I'm not bashful about telling you I can use your help. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get another town hall scheduled as soon as we can. Bye-bye. Good night.